We're back on Born Before 64, and this story is really a riveting story about a family that really cared about each other, that started with their roots in a very small area of Alabama and moved on to Tennessee. What part of Tennessee were you living in?
We lived in a little community called Lexi, which the nearest town is Winchester. We was 12 miles from town.
12 miles, so that seemed like an eternity, right?
We were lucky in those days to get to town 3 times a year, and if you got to town, it was something to talk about for the next week.
Really?
And if you went to buy something that you needed in town, and they didn't have it, it wasn't to be had. Nobody in the world had it because you couldn't find it in town.
Let me ask a question. I remember, you know, in my early youth, back in the early 50s, we did actually have a lot, so we made a lot of things. Did you make a lot of things to play with, or what did you do for fun, if any?
We could almost look at each other and say, what do you mean fun?
I made one toy for myself every year. Whenever we used the fertilizer, if it was sewed together, if you pulled the string apart just right, you had a long continuous string. And I'd save all this string. And whenever it was done, I'd start rolling it up and rolling it up. And pretty soon I could make myself a pretty hard ball out of it. And that would be the ball to get out in the backyard and bat around a little bit.
Right, for baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So did you ever make anything, Barb?
We learned to make sock monkeys in home economics, and that was not so much a toy. It was supposed to be a craft to teach us to do something that maybe we could sell at some point in our lives. But there just wasn't that much market around there for sock monkeys because it was the one thing everyone had.
Right.
But no toys. It was the woods, the picking of the flowers.
Did you have radio at all?
In the early days on the mountain, we had a radio probably 3 months out of the year, during cotton season, when they could afford to buy a battery. And then after we moved to Tennessee, we had no electric and no money to buy the battery. So they was probably 3 or 4 years there, we didn't have anything.
So how did you find out about what was going on in the world, if you did?
I said, maybe somebody heard the news, a neighbor or something, hey, did you hear about the Korean War breaking out or something like that? No, I didn't know nothing about that.
No. Wow. That period of time when we had no radio, when we had no lights, no running water in the house, I mean, I think what I really want to get across, look what time we're talking about. We're talking about in the mid-50s, that here we are in this place, and this is America. And how in the world were we living that third world in America? Where was the help? How were we supposed to ever come out of that?
So if you didn't have electric, you didn't have heat. Am I correct?
No.
No heat, no electric,
heat,
no water.
No water.
And the road was impassable.
The road was impassable. Did it snow there?
Occasionally.
Occasionally. Did you have, now the clothing situation had to be tough too.
Very. I picked blackberries for 50 cents a gallon to buy my winter clothes.
50 cents a gallon.
Right. I think all of us did the blackberry picking, and you know, $1 would buy you maybe a pair of flip-flops, or maybe even a couple of dollars. You could buy a pair of shoes that tied up, very inexpensive tennis shoes. I mean, I do not think most people can ever fathom that here, right here in the United States, children were living like that in southern Appalachia, and yet we're just among so many.
Well, there was an area in our section of the country that was left behind. Today it would be considered child abuse. They would take the kids away from you. For I had to be an old man, about 7 years old maybe, a real cold, frosty morning. I went out to play. I shouldn't have went out to play. From my older brother and my dad was walking down the little lane by the house, and they had the crosscut saw and the sledgehammer and axe. And Dad stopped and he looked at me. Then he took a couple more steps and he looked back again. And the third time he looked back, he says, "Boy, you might as well come along and learn how to do something." And that day I was put on the end of a crosscut saw, and I've worked from that day on.
When you decided eventually, when you left and you went to Chicago, how long did you work in that factory before you started your own business and you got married?
I spent approximately 10 years in a steel mill, and then myself and another man became partners in a dry cleaning plant that we had for about 9 years. And him being a sharp businessman and me not business-wise, he got the money and I got the shaft, and I went back to the steel mills.
Okay, all right. So when did you retire from the steel mill?
In 2003, I retired and moved back to Tennessee.
And do you like it there today?
I like it there because of the home that we've been able to make together. But there's no place in the world that I can spend another 48 years of my life. I still consider the Chicago
Your home?
my home, yes.
Do you miss it?
Whenever I get back in Illinois, I'm home.
Right. I have to thank both of you for joining me today. And Barbara, we know how happy you are today. We'd like to invite you to come back, and we'd like to help you do the documentary, and we'd also like to help you do the audio, because I think your story is such a magnificent one. I mean, it tells the real story of Southern Appalachia from two young people, in my mind, that really tell the real true story, and I think that's the most important thing. And we'll have different pictures throughout the actual television show today that we'll be showing you of the land of where you're talking about, which I think is really important. And if you could bring me some other pictures of Chicago, we'd really appreciate it.
I don't know just how many I got of the Chicago deal. I probably got a few.
Okay. That we can share with our viewers. That would be beautiful.
The one picture I brought, I'm most proud of, that's called Bob's Nightmare. It was in the pictures I brought today. Was something that, boy, it turned into a project. I worked on that thing for 6 weeks and didn't make a scratch in it. I'm a machinist, supposed to machine this thing, but I can't do nothing with it. Every morning it was so disgusting. I didn't want to go to work. They'd have these salesmen lined up like a little parade. They always had the perfect tool going to cut this thing. I would start it up, and bing, bing, pong, tool broke. Bing, bing, pong, tool broke. Okay. I went through that for 6 weeks, and finally they found a big company somewhere down in the Chicago area, had a monster grinder that they could grind it. The thing was so hard you couldn't cut it.
We'll be back next time on Born Before 64. Don't forget to check out our website at www.bornbefore64.com.
Thank you for joining us on Born Before 64 with Kathryn Raaker.